Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm 26, live in a quiet suburb outside of Portland, and most of the time, I keep to myself. I work maintenance at a local college. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. I like simple things: walking to work, listening to old records, fixing stuff when it breaks. Life is plain, quiet, maybe too quiet sometimes. My best friend, Cody, and I have been close since high school. We drifted a little after graduation, but somehow always found our way back to each other. Football games, garage projects, barbecues. That kind of friendship. Unshakable. His mom, Danielle, used to drive us to practice back in the day, and I remember thinking even then how different she was from the other moms. Not just in looks, though she was beautiful in that effortless, natural way, but in presence. Warm, direct, the kind of woman who didn't fill the silence with noise, but with presence. I hadn't seen her much in recent years. Cody moved out, got his own apartment, and life happened. But one Saturday in late fall, I stopped by Cody's place to help him mount a new TV. He wasn't home yet, ran late picking it up, so I texted him and, out of boredom, drove over to his mom's house. Just to say hey. It was 5 minutes away. The porch light was on, even though the sun hadn't set. I rang the bell. No answer. But just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open, and there she was, Danielle, standing barefoot in worn jeans and a soft cream sweater, her hair up in one of those loose buns that always seemed to fall apart but somehow made her look even better. "Nathan?" she said, surprised. Then her expression softened into a smile. "Wow, I haven't seen you in forever." I smiled. "Yeah, figured I'd say hi while I was nearby. Didn't mean to interrupt anything." She stepped aside. "Come in, don't be ridiculous. I was just finishing up some shelves. The hallway's a mess. Don't judge." I walked in. The house smelled like cinnamon and wood polish. Familiar, unchanged. Felt weirdly comforting. She led me to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of iced tea like no time had passed. "You still working at the college?" she asked. "Yeah. Fixing broken pipes, rewiring lights. Keeping young minds educated through plumbing." She laughed. "Hey, that's important. More than they know." We talked for a while. About Cody, about life. She told me she was working remotely now, doing HR consulting from home. Said the house felt big since Cody moved out. She tried to sound light-hearted about it, but I saw it in her eyes. That little flicker. The kind people don't notice unless they're paying attention. Then she mentioned something about the coat closet shelf collapsing. I offered to take a look. "Just need a screwdriver and 10 minutes, I said. Her brow arched slightly. "Still the fixer, huh?" I shrugged. "Can't help myself." The shelf was worse than she described. Hinge cracked, screws loose, everything leaning to one side. I ended up taking it apart completely, then reassembling it with some parts one had in my car toolkit. While I worked, she sat nearby on the stairs, sipping tea, telling me stories about Cody's childhood. Some I remembered, others I didn't. She laughed more easily the longer we talked. I did too. There was something low pressure about it. Like we were both too tired for small talk but too comfortable for silence. After I finished, she touched my arm gently. "You always had a good heart, Nathan. I'm glad that hasn't changed." The way she said it, it wasn't flirty. But it wasn't not flirty either. I stayed a little longer than I meant to. She packed me a sandwich for the road, even though I wasn't hungry. When I left, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed gently, leaning against the frame. "Don't be a stranger," she said. And I wasn't. Not after that. A week later, I stopped by again. This time it was her suggestion. She texted asking if I had a moment to look at the porch light. Something about a loose wire. It wasn't urgent, but she said she'd feel better knowing it wasn't going to catch fire. I came by that afternoon. She looked the same, soft sweatshirt, barefoot again, coffee in hand. We ended up sitting on the back porch after I fixed the light, watching the trees sway in the breeze. Her dog, Bailey, lay curled up at our feet. She asked about my family, my childhood, my plans. I told her more than I usually tell people. There was something about the way she listened. It wasn't passive. She actually heard me, caught me off guard. After a pause, she looked out at the yard. You know, this place gets really quiet. Too quiet sometimes, especially when it rains. I nodded. I get that. Then, like it meant nothing, she said, sometimes I leave the door unlocked. I blinked. You shouldn't. That's dangerous. She looked at me for a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. I keep it unlocked, just in case you come. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. She said it like she was just stating a fact. I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything at all. Just sat there, hands wrapped around a cold coffee mug, heartbeat louder than the wind in the trees. The next few days after she said that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed the words in my head at night when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Just in case you come. She hadn't said it with a smirk, or with a wink, or even in a way that demanded a response. She said it like she meant it, like it had already been true long before she admitted it out loud. That's what stayed with me. I didn't go back immediately. I told myself I needed space. But even when I was working, my mind would wander. I'd be fixing a leaky faucet in one of the dorms and suddenly remember how she looked sitting on the porch, barefoot, calm, watching me like she hadn't had company in years. Not real company, anyway. A week passed before I saw her again. It was a Tuesday evening when she texted me, "Do you have time to look at a shelf in the laundry room? It's coming loose." I didn't hesitate. I drove over after work, still in my faded uniform shirt and work boots. When I pulled up, the porch light was on again, soft amber, glowing like a quiet invitation. She opened the door before I even knocked, as if she'd been waiting. "Hi," she said simply, stepping aside to let me in. She wore a soft, oversized flannel and leggings, hair tied back, face without makeup, and somehow, she looked more beautiful than ever. The house was warm, cozy. A record played low in the background, something soft and slow from the 70s. The shelf in the laundry room really was loose, but it would have held a few more weeks. She didn't need it fixed. We both knew that. Still, I got to work just to have something to focus on. She stood nearby, holding a mug of tea, watching. "You always come when I call," she said, "even when it's something small." "I like helping," I muttered, keeping my eyes on the shelf. "Feels useful. You've always been good at that." There was silence after that, not awkward, but weighted. I finished quickly and stood up, brushing drywall dust off my hands. "I could make dinner," she offered suddenly. "I mean, if you're not in a rush." I wasn't. Of course I wasn't. We ended up in the kitchen, side by side. She chopped vegetables, I stirred a pot. We laughed a little more than usual. Talked about things that didn't matter. Favorite movies, music we listened to growing up. How Cody once tried to impress a girl by pretending he spoke French and failed miserably. By the time we sat down to eat, the mood had shifted. We weren't just talking to fill silence anymore. She told me about her job, how the clients felt mechanical, how Zoom meetings made her feel like she didn't exist outside the screen. She said some days she wouldn't speak to anyone except the delivery guy. I thought I'd be used to it by now, she said, staring down into her wine glass. But I still miss being seen. You are, I said softly. At least, by me. Her eyes met mine across the table. And that was the first time it really felt like the edge of something sharp and real. After dinner, we didn't rush. She put the dishes in the sink. I stood nearby drying. At one point, we both reached for the same plate, and our hands touched. Not just a brush, a full, still touch. She looked up. I looked down. Neither of us pulled away. But then she cleared her throat, gently slipped her hand back and said, "You should probably get going. It's getting late." I nodded, but my feet didn't move. I watched her as she walked me to the door. She hesitated with her hand on the knob. "You'll come again?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "Yeah," I said, "if you want me to." She opened the door, and the cool night air drifted in. I stepped outside. She stayed in the doorway, one hand against the frame. I turned around before getting in the car. She was still watching me. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't lock it tonight." I looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. "Should I come back?" She didn't answer. She just stepped back into the house, slowly, quietly, leaving the door ajar. After that, I started noticing little things, subtle changes. She began texting more, not often, but just enough. A picture of the leaves turning gold in her yard with a caption, "Reminds me of that tree we used to climb." A message at 8:41 p.m. The heater's making that clicking noise again. Or sometimes just, "Are you up?" I always was. We didn't cross the line. Not yet. But we danced close to it. Every time I visited, I stayed a little longer. The lights were dimmer. The wine poured slower. The silences stretched softer. One night, after I fixed a leaky kitchen faucet, I sat on the edge of the couch, sipping tea while she curled her feet beneath her on the other end. We were talking about nothing, weather, old movies, and then she asked, out of nowhere, "What do you see when you look at me?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, but her eyes didn't leave mine. "Do you still see Cody's mom? Or do you see me?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know how to answer without making everything real. Finally, I said, "I see someone who's easy to be around. Someone I think about when I'm not here." That answer made her pause. She looked down at her tea, lips pressed together. "I keep the door unlocked sometimes," she said again, her voice quieter now. "Even when I'm not expecting anyone." "It's stupid, I know." I shook my head. "It's not stupid." She looked up. "Just dangerous," I added. She smiled faintly. "I think I'm tired of being safe." It was a Friday night just after 10. I hadn't planned to go over. I hadn't even texted her. I was sitting in my apartment, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room, when I looked at the time and thought, she probably hasn't locked it yet. That thought shouldn't have been enough. But it was. I didn't change. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys, jacket, and walked out. The night air hit cold and sharp, but it woke something in me. On the drive over, I played the radio low and said nothing. My fingers gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. I parked a block away, like I was doing something I shouldn't, like her neighbors might guess just from seeing my car. I walked slowly, hands in my pockets. The porch light was on again, and the door was unlocked. I stood there for a second, one hand on the doorknob, unsure if this was bold or foolish, or both. I turned it. The hallway was dim, lit only by the warm glow of a lamp near the stairs. The house was quiet. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. My boots stayed by the mat. My breath caught. She was sitting on the couch, curled up in a blanket, reading. She looked up when she heard the door close but didn't act surprised. Not even a flinch. Instead, she just smiled. Soft, quiet. "I wondered if you would," she said. I swallowed. "You left it open." "I always do, just in case." I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do with my hands. My heart beat louder than it should have been. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "Should I have locked it?" I shook my head. "No." She held my gaze. "Then come here." There was no rush in the way she said it. No command. It was an invitation. I walked slowly toward the couch. She shifted, making room for me beneath the blanket. I sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. I could smell vanilla from her lotion. Her hair was still slightly damp, like she had just showered. She turned the book over and set it on the table. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I just couldn't stop thinking." "About what?" "You." She didn't respond at first. Then, quietly, "Me too." Her hand was close to mine. We didn't touch right away. There was something sacred about the space between us, like neither of us wanted to break it too fast. But eventually my hand moved, just slightly, and hers met it. Fingers interlocked. Warmth passed through me like electricity and calm, all at once. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder. "This is probably a mistake," she said, not sounding convinced. "Probably," I whispered. "But I don't care," she added. Neither did I. We didn't speak for a while, just sat like that, side by side, our hands together under the blanket, the lamp painting soft gold on the walls. The room was silent, but everything between us was screaming, quietly, beautifully. She shifted first, turning to face me more directly. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for a sign, or permission, or both. "I felt alone for a long time," she said, "even when I'm not." I didn't say anything. I just leaned in, slowly, slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. She didn't. Our lips touched softly, once, again, then deeper. Her hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and everything else disappeared. It wasn't wild. It wasn't rushed. It felt like coming up for air after holding your breath for years. Her touch was tender, almost unsure, like she hadn't done this in a long time, or maybe just hadn't felt it like this before. We moved together without words. Her body curled into mine like it had always belonged there. She led me gently and I followed carefully. When we undressed, it wasn't about urgency. It was slow, like each button, each sleeve, each breath meant something. And when we were finally there, fully there, it was quiet, respectful, intense. I memorized the freckles on her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped my back, the way her breath hitched when I whispered her name. We didn't say anything afterward. We didn't need to. We lay side by side in the dark, our legs tangled, the blanket barely covering us. Her hand rested on my chest, rising and falling with every breath. Her eyes were closed, but I knew she wasn't asleep. "I shouldn't feel this calm," she murmured. "Why not?" "Because I'm scared of what this is, what it means." I turned slightly, brushing her hair back from her cheek. "We don't have to define it. Not tonight." She nodded faintly. "Can you stay?" Of course. She leaned into me. I don't want this to be a one-time thing. It's not, I said, more certain than I expected to be. In the morning, the sun crept in through the blinds. Her alarm went off once, but she didn't move. I woke up first and just lay there, watching her breathe. The way her face softened in sleep. The faintest smile at the corner of her lips. When she finally stirred, she looked at me. No regret in her eyes. Just reality. And something else. Now what? She asked softly. I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. I'll come when you leave it open, I said. She nodded slowly. I always will. The next few weeks felt like some strange dream, real and surreal all at once. I started coming over more, but only when it was quiet. Late in the evening, early mornings before work. Sometimes just for an hour. Sometimes I stayed the night. It was never planned. She never asked me to. But the door? It was always unlocked. And I always walked through. We didn't talk about what we were doing. That was the unspoken agreement. It wasn't about titles. It wasn't even about romance in the traditional sense. It was something else. Something deeper. We existed in a fragile, beautiful in-between. A private world we made up and carefully protected. Moment by moment, breath by breath. She changed in small ways. Danielle wore her hair down more often. She cooked less like she was feeding someone and more like she was enjoying herself. She started playing music in the house again. Old vinyl records that she'd forgotten she owned. She lit candles in the evening, even when she was alone. And I changed too. I wasn't just fixing her shelves or tightening loose hinges. I was learning her routines. I noticed which teacup she used in the morning. I learned that she hummed when she folded laundry, that she always locked the back door before bed, but never the front. But reality always finds its way back in. It started with a knock, a neighbor dropping off mail by mistake. Danielle answered in her robe, and I was in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring coffee. The neighbor didn't say anything, but the way she paused, that extra second, told us both she noticed something. Then there was the morning Cody called. He was coming by that afternoon to grab some boxes from the garage. She texted me immediately, "Don't come today, please." I didn't reply right away, not because I was angry, but because I finally realized something. We had been pretending we weren't hiding. Now we were, and that changed everything. That evening, when I did come over again, the air felt different. Not cold, not tense, just measured. We ate dinner together like always, but she didn't sit as close. Her hand didn't reach for mine. And when I finally asked if everything was okay, she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "I don't want you to regret this." "I don't," I said quickly. "I never have." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You say that now, but you're young, Nathan. You have time. I don't." "You have more time than you think," I said. "And I'm not going anywhere." But I felt her slipping already. The next week, the door was locked. I stood on the porch longer than I should have, hoping it was a mistake. That maybe she was asleep, or forgot, or just tired. But it was locked. I didn't knock. The next day, she texted, "Sorry. Habit." I wasn't feeling well, but we both knew it wasn't just that. I still saw her now and then, still helped with small things, replaced the light in the hallway, fixed the gutter. But something had shifted. We didn't sit close anymore. She started saying things like, "I'll let you know if I need help," instead of, "You should come by later." Then one night I asked her plainly, gently, Do you still keep it unlocked? She looked down, fidgeted with her necklace, and said, Not lately. I nodded. Because you don't want me to come? Her eyes lifted to mine. Because I want to, too much. The final time I went over, it was to bring back a book I'd borrowed. She answered the door, smiled like nothing had changed, invited me in. But I didn't step inside. I should probably go, I said, handing it to her. She took it and said quietly, I keep the light on sometimes, out of habit. I gave her a small smile. Do you still unlock it? She hesitated, then said, Not anymore. I nodded. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. I stepped off the porch and turned back one last time. She stood in the doorway, holding the book to her chest. And in the softest voice I'd ever heard from her, she asked, Should I? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her I'd always come if she let me, that I'd never stop. But instead, I said, Only if you really mean it. Her eyes glistened. Not tears. Just wait. I always did, she said. Then she closed the door softly, not sadly, and the lock clicked. Now, sometimes I walk by that street. I don't stop. I don't look for her car. I don't check the light. But when I pass, I still wonder. Maybe she still leaves it unlocked, just in case.